Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome to our third session of the day. It's going so quick. Fourth session of fifth session. Oh my God. The day is going so fast, everybody. And that happens when you're having fun and when you are having deep conversations, right? That is why we are here. My name is Sara Lomelin. For those that do not know me, I'm the CEO of Philanthropy Together, and Philanthropy Together is a field catalyst for collective giving. We are in this world, we're a global nonprofit initiative to really showcase the power of collective and collaborative giving. Closed captioning is available for this session and for all of us. I'm doing all the housekeeping messages here. So, um, use it if you need it. Be mindful on of our We Give Summit community guidelines that Ty just put in the chat, and stay until the end to see if you have won a $50 gift card in our attendance raffle. This is going to be to use at the We Give Summit shop that is first this year, and we have really cool, We Give Summit swag. So thank you so much for joining us today to disagreeing better, how to turn tension into connection. I think we all agree that we all need this session, right? Because even though many times we try to be, or we think we're being very open-minded, we all have biases, and it's really important to try to see each other's humanity, see each other's in their eyes, and find those things that makes us similar and makes us human, right? Matt, um, I am extremely excited about this session because we have an amazing speaker, Don Strauss from Braver Angels. And Don is going to talk a lot about, of course, the political spectrum, because it's how, conservatives think, how liberals think, but do not get caught just only in the political discourse, but use these tools to learn how to disagree and to connect with everybody, right? Sometimes we are having very big disagreements with our own family about different things. So find we hope to find this workshop and this discussion useful, and please engage with us in the chat and ask questions. And with that, I am very, very, very happy to introduce Dawn. Dawn, are you there?
Yay!
Yes. Hi. Awesome. Great to see you. And I'm going to pass it to you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for everybody who is joining us today. I am going to do the very, for me, scary part of sharing my screen, making sure I can see. All right. Um, who is excited to learn how to disagree better today? This course, I'm really, really excited to have everybody here. This is, as Sarah mentioned, Braver Angels, our focus is on talking politics, which what a scary thing today, right? That kind of puts the braver in our name, is that we tackle this stuff head on. And while the examples I'm going to be using today are how to talk with people who disagree with you politically, these are great skills to use anytime. Whenever you're having a disagreement, whenever you think that you're going to be in a challenging conversation with somebody, regardless if it's politics, family, religion, any of the things that are a little scary to talk about. But today I am here on behalf of Braver Angels, and let's just dive in. Time is limited, so we are going to get started. Gonna so our goals. What are our goals for today? Goals for this workshop are to number one, gain a better understanding of the values and the concerns of people who differ from you politically. It's to gain better skills for listening, and listening in a way that the other person that you're talking with feels heard. That's really, really, really important in these conversations. We are also here to gain better skills for sharing your perspective in a way that somebody else might be able to hear you, even if they disagree with what you're going to say. So now let's take a look at what we'll be covering in our session today. We're going to start with some ground rules and some expectations to abandon. Um, then we're also going to do, well, I'm going to skip past the introductions. We're going because you already met me. And then we're going to do some basic skills. We're going to do a little bit of practice of these skills on what to do when you're in conversation with somebody that is disagreeing with you, and then we'll do a very quick wrap up. So I'm just going to go to our ground rules. Um, just to make very clear everyone's expectations, just because of time, this workshop may not be as interactive as if we were doing this in person. However, I do want to make sure that I'm setting expectations correctly. And we are here to talk about skills, not about policies. We're not going to get into policy debates. And yes, you are going to hear some political examples, but we're not really here to talk about the merits of the politics that you will hear. We're here to gain the skills on how to listen and how to communicate better. Um, this is not a competition. We're here to help each other and help each other learn about skills. So, are we all agreed that we can move forward? Okay, yay. Thank you, Ty. Um, So we're going to start out. I mentioned briefly some skills to expectations to abandon. We're going to start out with some expectations to abandon when it comes to communicating with people who disagree with you. Um, Persuasion. I want everybody to abandon that expectation that when you're in a conversation with somebody that you're going to disagree, that you do disagree with, abandon that desire to persuade the other person that they're wrong and that you're right about this issue that is important to both of you, actually. Instead of saying, like, you know what, I'm going to get that person to change their mind, they're going to see my point of view. Abandon that expectation. Instead, your goal is to hope that they will see you as a somewhat reasonable person so that they're at least willing to listen to what you have to say. And also, you also need to abandon the expectation that everybody you're going to come across has taken this workshop. You have taken this workshop and you have these skills and you have learned about how to have these conversations, but there's a pretty decent chance that the person you're going to be speaking with has not gone through one of these workshops and does not have the skills. So instead, when you're having this initial conversation, when you're going to test this out with your friends, with your family, you may have to expect that you might have to do a bit of a heavier lift during the conversation. So we're going to skip past intros. Unfortunately, we are limited on time. And I'm hoping that everybody, I know Ty is going to put my email address in the chat at some point, and I'm hoping that maybe you can come and introduce yourselves to me after this session. But we are going to focus on listening skills, our conversation skills, and they are known as our LAP skills. Um, LAP is an acronym for listen, acknowledge, pivot, and perspective. Our first skill is to listen. So, in order to be able to really listen to what the other person is saying to you, this is really challenging. And this is one that I have to work on every single time I'm in conversation with somebody I disagree with. But you are going to have to turn that inner debater in your head off. This is really, really hard, but we just can't spend the time when you're listening to your conversation partner trying to figure out how am I going to get them? How, like, this is, how am I going to, like, oh, they said that. That's wrong. I can, get them there. We're going to have to turn that off, and you're going to have to listen truly with the intent of listening. Something that helps is that when you are in conversation with somebody who disagrees, and when you're listening, listen with the intent that to summarize when the person is done speaking. What's the advantage of being able to listen to summarize? Your partner is going to feel heard. When your partner is speaking, um, focus on the other's viewpoints and their underlying concerns that you're hearing in their argument. Behind every belief is a story, and that's actually something that we are going to try to get at is, what is the concern that you're hearing? What is a life experience that this person perhaps maybe had that would have shaped his or her view on this topic? Look for agreements when you're listening to your partner. Um, Even with people that you really, really disagree with, a lot of times there's something in the argument that maybe you can actually agree with. You don't have to, agree on completely on what they're saying, but maybe there is something that you're hearing, like, oh, you know what? I want my child to have, be safe in school as well. A lot of times, although the policy may be something that you disagree with, there is a point that you are able to agree with this other on. And this is key for being able to form a connection with that other person. If you can form connection with your partner, well, now you're actually in conversation rather than kind of where we're at right now as a society, which is we're not talking, people are talking and we're not listening. But to be able to form that connection is a very, very powerful start to being able to listen and to hear the other person. Okay. So, in this next activity that we are going to do, I'm going to expose you to some core conservative and liberal values and concerns that underline many specific policy ideas. The goal here is to help you listen not just for the content of someone's view, for example, that they approve or disapprove of, let's say, affirmative action policies, but to really listen for values and concerns, the whys and the worries behind their views. One reason we are so polarized in this country is that many of us don't understand how people we know come to their views and their support for certain candidates. So we make up our own ideas about why they hold their positions. And often it's often far from how they see themselves. If we understand one another better, we can learn to disagree better and often find some common ground. We've developed a list of 10 values and concerns of conservatives and liberals. These lists are not complete or phrased in ways that everybody on each side would necessarily embrace. However, they have been vetted by Reds, that's our Braver Angels term. Our Reds are our conservatives, our Republicans, and Blues. Braver Angels, our Blues are our Democrats, our liberals. Um, but so these have been vetted by Reds and Blues and Braver Angels as good faith efforts to capture some core values and concerns of conservatives and liberals. We are going to read through these lists, and I encourage you to suspend your inner critic as you read through the values and concerns of the other side. In other words, try to learn and absorb with some generosity of spirit rather than arguing back in your mind. You may even find yourself agreeing with some of the ideas on the other side, and this can help you find common ground. Neither side owns the values and concerns on their list. And there is some overlap between conservatives and liberals, but each side tends to emphasize some values and concerns more than others. So, for some conservative values, and these values vary among libertarians, social conservatives, populists, and free enterprise conservatives. But some core conservative values: individual freedom and personal responsibility, free market capitalism as an engine of human progress, patriotism, an enthusiastic love of country, social values of religion, family, and respect for tradition, local initiative and local charity. Next, I'm gonna share some conservative concerns. And once again, these concerns vary amongst libertarians, social conservatives, populists, and free enterprise conservatives. But some core concerns: grouping people into identity categories that compromise their individuality, government expansion, such as overregulation and excessive taxation, that limits the freedom of individuals and businesses to make their own choices, skepticism about the ability of government to manage complex programs, suspicion of utopian promises, and caution about social engineering as coming with many unintended consequences, and being immediately labeled with an ism or phobia when expressing views on public policy and cultural issues. Now, for the liberal side, liberal values, and these obviously there's some variation between progressives, moderate liberals, but some liberal values are inclusiveness, especially for those on the margins, diversity, the value of human differences, a level playing field for people who have been denied opportunities, an active government to help those in need sustain a healthy environment and ensure fairness, safe social environments, which includes attention to language. Some core concerns amongst liberals: abuses of free market capitalism that lead to exploitation and inequality, ignoring historical forces of injustice that are still present, patriotism that is not balanced with criticism, groups who are left out of social progress, being immediately labeled with terms such as woke and big government liberal when presenting views on public policy and cultural issues. So now we are going to ask you to reflect on this question. How might you better understand the core value? How might better understanding the core values and concerns of people who differ from you politically help you listen, communicate, and disagree better about policy differences? Remember, even if you disagree with belief statements from the opposite side, if you understand them better, you can communicate your ideas more effectively. Here is an example of a liberal who favors affirmative action and has listened carefully to understand the other side. Conservatives' concerns about affirmative action policies is often connected to their emphasis on treating people as individuals and not as members of groups. Even conservatives who would personally benefit from affirmative action tend to see it as violating a key principle. Remember, your task here is not to analyze and critique the other side, but to ask yourself how understanding the influence of these values and concerns might help you listen more carefully and then communicate with people in your world who, who you differ from politically. Try to identify one or two values and concerns on the other side's list that might help you better understand their viewpoint on a divisive policy, even if you don't agree with it. And then reflect on how knowing this can help you better understand and communicate with someone who differs from you. Thank you for everybody who shared. I much appreciate it. Our next skill is acknowledge of our lab skills. Most political conversations go this way. You say up, I say down. You say hot, I say cold. You say my candidate is terrible, and I say yours is even worse. The key principle is to connect before you disagree. Don't start by making a counter argument. Start by acknowledging that you heard what the other person said. For example, I hear you on fill in the blank, or I get that this issue is really important to you. Note that acknowledging can be about the content of what the person says, the intensity of their feelings about the issue, or both. A brief paraphrase of the person's view goes a long way for making them feel heard. Why is this important in communication across differences? Well, you now come across as open-minded, which makes the other person feel comfortable with you. And they're going to feel comfortable in engaging in conversation with you. You have created a connection, and now you are more willing to listen to each other. You've communicated respect. You've heard them. You made that clear that you heard them. Wait for the other person to affirm that you understand their point. Sometimes you didn't capture what they were saying and they clarify. So then listen and try again. Try to acknowledge again. Here's some examples. I hear you on climate change. You don't want the federal government regulating the economy over a threat that might or might not materialize. Or, I get that you think we are running out of time on climate change and have to take strong measures to address it. Um, so we're gonna see. Um, okay. Sometimes it can be helpful um, to add a short, I agree with you on when acknowledging the other person's view. For example, I agree with you that the immigration system is broken, and it sounds like your solution is to fill in the blank. But don't just say an empty, I agree with you, without acknowledging what the person says. Sometimes it's okay to ask a genuine clarifying question as well. Um, but a clarifying question genuinely needs to be a clarifying question. This is not your opportunity to catch your partner in a gotcha moment. Um, but it's actually an opportunity to make sure that you understood what the person was trying to communicate with you. So we are going to practice the acknowledge by reading two different prompts, expressing two different views on policing and public safety. Decide which one of the two prompts is farthest from your own position, and then write down word for word an acknowledgement statement that shows you have heard that person in the prompt. The two prompts are, well, or I'm going to read them aloud actually, but they're going to be on their slides. And after you've written your response, we'll see if anybody wants to share their acknowledgement statement. One important thing is make sure you only acknowledge. This is not the time to add your perspective yet. Although you can briefly note if you agree with something you said that they said, but really the point of this is mainly to focus on connecting with the other person and then pause. I will now read the two prompts on the next slide and then give you time to write down your acknowledge response. So the first statement is going to be a conservative policing. And just reminder, you're going to write your acknowledgement statement on the, if you're a liberal, you would write it on this one. If you're a conservative, you'll write your acknowledgement statement on our next one, which will be our liberal view on policing. Here is the conservative prompt. And like I said, if this prompt that's farthest from your viewpoint, write down exactly how you would acknowledge the person who said these words to you. I think the size and scope of government have gotten out of control. Government has ballooned into a bloated, power hungry force, micromanaging our lives and draining our wallets. We are drowning in taxes and regulations, and too many people have traded self governance for reliance on handouts, expecting bureaucrats to solve their problems instead of taking personal responsibility. Now, don't get me wrong, the government has a role in maintaining infrastructure, law, and order, and providing for those truly incapable of helping themselves. But we've crossed the line into full blown nanny state territory. And people like you seem to believe that for every challenge in life, the answer is more government. Can't you see that your obsession with government help is strangling the American experiment in self-governance by turning engaged citizens into lazy dependents. If you are against that statement, now is maybe the time to jot down your acknowledge response to this one, or you can wait for our next one. Our liberal prompt. Here's our liberal prompt. You might choose to write your acknowledge response. I believe the government should ensure fairness and opportunity for all, not just the privileged few. That means believing in education, healthcare, and social programs that give everyone a fighting chance. Taxes and regulations aren't punishments. They're the price we pay for a civilized society. Of course, government must be efficient and accountable, and government programs sometimes have unintended effects. But right now, the main problem is unchecked corporate power on that rigs the system for wealthy while leaving ordinary Americans behind. Yet people like you act as if any government oversight is tyranny while turning a blind eye towards corporate greed. Can't you see that without a government strong enough to manage the playing field, we'd be living in a ruthless free for all where only the rich and powerful survive? Thank you for everybody who shared. Thank you. And I think, as those are wonderful acknowledgement statements, all three. And I just wanted to point out, I know that we are all well aware of what the climate is like today and how quick we are to jump on each other and attack each other. How would you feel if you were in a conversation with somebody who disagreed and instead of saying, you're wrong, or, like, that's not, like, how can you say this and then support this? How would you feel if after stating your views, somebody said back to you just what we just heard, something like that? You are now ready to enter into dialogue with this other person, which is actually the point. We need to have these conversations. We need to have these difficult conversations. So thank you for everybody who shared your acknowledgement statement. This is great. We are now going to discuss the pivot skill. After you listen and acknowledge what the other person is saying, if they do not ask what you think about the topic, you can use a pivot to signal what you would like to now offer your own viewpoint. A pivot statement can be especially useful when the other person is speaking at length or with strong emotion on a topic. It is a way to get an okay to take your turn in the conversation. Examples are, can I offer my thoughts on this? Or this is something I've thought a lot about. Look for a verbal, okay, sure, or a nonverbal nod or any other body language that indicates the other person is willing to listen to you. When you pivot, you are not yet offering your perspective on the issue. Think of the pivot as using the turn signal in your car, indicating you would like to make a turn if the way is clear. The actual turn comes later. If the other person seems open to listening to what you have to say, then continue. If the other person just repeats their point, um, ignore your pivot, or shows wariness about taking your turn, verbally or non-verbally, then consider backing up. This may not be the right time for you to share your views. You could listen and acknowledge some more and see if they are ready to listen to you, or you can just exit the conversation. Before we move on, I just want to clarify that keep in mind that a pivot statement does not get into the content of your view. It just tries to see if the other person is willing to share the conversation with you. Oh, we are now going to move on to our final lap skill, which is perspective. Now we get to the point where you do get to share your own viewpoint. Woo! You've listened, you've acknowledged, and you've pivoted. So you've been given the green light that the person you're in conversation with is ready to listen to you. Um, so when you're offering your perspective, we're asked that you use I statements. I statements are so important because they communicate this is how I see it, not This is how it is. Fact statements, when it comes to political disagreements, rarely work. We trust different sources these days. So it doesn't make sense to make truth statements when we're all trusting different sources of truth. Some examples of I statements, or rather than truth statements, is, well, this is how I see it. This is why I see it this way, as opposed to, no, this is absolutely how it is. We encourage you to name the sources of your views. I'm I'm basing my views on data about the risk of suicide from guns in the home, which is a bigger risk to life than stranger attacks. Or my reading has convinced me that personal gun ownership is deeply rooted in the US Constitution. You can share a life experience or a personal story behind your viewpoint. And this is my personal favorite one because this is how we see the humanity in each other, is when we hear each other's stories. You can say something like, I came at this as a child of immigrants, or I used to live in a southern border town, and here's what I saw. Also, try to agree if you can. And I'm not telling you you need to abandon your principles and your beliefs, um, but try to mention something that perhaps you do agree with on the other side. Can say something like, I'm completely with you on making sure our elections are trustworthy and open to everyone who is eligible to vote. I think the approach I support will bring that about. Um, of Avoid negative labels. Uh, Resist the urge to say that's a racist or a socialist policy. Avoid all of you, Democrats, all of you Republican language, and avoid generalizations in general. Focus on the people in this conversation rather than trying to lump everyone into a larger group. Today, we tend to share our point of view from this angry, I'm right, there's no other way, and we're coming on strong. And that's really the point of, is how to express your opinion in a way that's palatable, that people are able to listen, that people are able to receive it. So we're not telling you to soften your opinion. We're not telling you, to change your values or try to meet in the middle. We're simply trying to give tools on ways to express yourself so that you can better be heard. So, when you come into this, like, instead of saying, like, well, I know foreign policy, there, we need to be giving, giving money to this country, because it's the right thing to do, and I know, and I care, and you obviously don't care about starving people. A better way to do that is, like what we just heard. Well, I've worked, in impoverished communities or overseas. I've seen firsthand, how much our support is needed over there. So something like that is, if somebody's going to listen to you who perhaps disagrees with, who maybe disagrees on how, much aid the US gives overseas, somebody is going to be more inclined to listen to you when you approach it in this, well, I just, let me share my experience, why I've come to believe this, rather than I'm the only way to, I know you're wrong and you're a bad person. Um, that's kind of where we've gotten, and that's what we're trying to move away, is just using these communication tools to have more effective conversations.